Okay, so imagine this. You and your friends are stranded on a deserted island. The only way out? You have to build a sailboat, from scratch, and sail it across miles of open ocean. Well, that's exactly the challenge a group of YouTubers gave themselves. And what they found out there, it really pushes the limits of what you think is possible.
Right from the jump, the stakes were made incredibly clear. This wasn't just some fun video stunt. No, they were treating this like a real life-or-death situation. There was no plan B, no escape hatch. It was succeed or, well, you heard the man. And that's really the big question here, isn't it? It's one thing to come up with a crazy idea like this, but could a team with absolutely no boat-building skills, no sailing experience, nothing, actually conquer a jungle, the blistering heat, and the ocean itself? Let's dive into how they tried to tackle this insane task.
First, to really get what they were up against, you have to understand just how high the odds were stacked against them, from the second their feet hit the sand.
I mean, this slide just lays it all out. On one hand, you've got a goal that would make seasoned sailors and engineers sweat, and on the other, a bunch of creators. This huge gap between their ambition and their actual skill set, that was the real monster they had to fight the entire time.
And yeah, that lack of experience, it showed up right away. They couldn't even get the basics down. Just building a simple camp was a huge struggle. It was a pretty scary reality check that basically screamed, you have no idea how hard this is going to be.
And as if their own inexperience wasn't enough, the island itself was actively trying to take them out. We're talking deadly snakes, poisonous spiders, and just this crushing, relentless heat that was always pushing them towards dehydration and heat stroke.
Now this was a crucial warning from Jose, the one guy on the team who actually had some boat-building know-how. He knew that their success wasn't just about hard work or willpower. In the end, it was all going to come down to things they couldn't control at all, the wind and the tide. A warning that turned out to be tragically spot on. But you know what? Even with everything against them, they didn't pack it in. Nope. Instead, they started the long, painful process of turning literal garbage into their only hope for escape.
You know, for a group with no experience, their approach was surprisingly smart. They started by just scavenging the beach for anything they could use. Washed up barrels, plastic, you name it. They even built a little model to test their design before spending days, and I mean days, lashing together the main frame for that one big moment, the float test.
And the physical toll was just immense. Imagine spending all day under that scorching sun, hauling heavy barrels for miles across sharp rocks. The guys were pushed to their absolute breaking point, but every piece of junk they found felt like striking gold. It was the only thing keeping them going. And then this happened. After all that backbreaking work, they dragged the skeleton of a boat into the water. This was the moment of truth. If it sank, I think their spirits would have sunk right along with it. But it didn't. It actually floated. You can just feel the relief and this sudden surge of hope in his voice, right? That one successful test completely changed their mindset. The crazy, impossible dream suddenly felt real. They weren't just tying sticks together anymore, they were building their escape route. But their biggest challenge was still waiting for them. So, the boat's finally done. But the hardest part? That was still ahead of them. A grueling, multi-hour fight against the open sea. 12 hours. Let that number sink in. That's how long they ended up being on the water. A full half day of paddling, sailing, and just fighting for every single foot of progress on their homemade raft. And that journey? It was an absolute emotional roller coaster. The first few hours were just a brutal grind. Their paddles were breaking, guys were getting seasick. By hour 6, they were pretty much ready to give up. But then this miracle happened. The tide shifted, and it gave them a second wind, pushing them toward that final, desperate stretch. It was just one thing after another out there. Their paddles snapped, people were falling overboard, which cost them precious time and energy. The sun was beating down on them, the wind kept spinning them in circles. It was just non-stop crisis mode for hours and hours. After 11 hours of that hell, they could see it. They could see land. Victory was right there. They could almost touch it. But the ocean, it had one last cruel trick up its sleeve.
Half a mile. That's it. After everything they'd been through, the building, the exhaustion, the 12 hours of paddling, they were close enough to see the beach.
And then it happened. Just like their expert Haza warned them about, the one thing they couldn't fight turned against them. The tide changed. That same current that had been helping them for hours suddenly became a powerful, invisible force, ripping them right back out to sea. And that's the truly heartbreaking part. They didn't fail because they quit. They didn't fail because they weren't strong enough. They failed because they were maybe 20 minutes too late. It was a race against a clock they couldn't even see, and in the final moments, the clock won.
The devastation was just total. To see your goal right there in front of you, only to have it pulled away at the last second. It was just a soul-crushing blow. All that work, all that pain, for nothing.
So that brings us all the way back to that first question. Could they actually escape? After an effort that was, let's be honest, almost superhuman, the answer was a heartbreaking no.
Which kind of leads us with one final thought. They didn't reach their destination, so technically they failed. But they never stopped paddling. They never quit. They were just beaten by nature itself.